Good morning, Gala Rinpoche. Gala Rinpoche, can you hear us?
Hello, yes, we can hear you. Everything okay? Sound?
The sound is good, but can we do a check of Geshe-la's microphone?
Okay.
Okay.
Nga tu tele, ugu we,
Okay. Very
ugu
good.
we. Oh, ngodi ngesha. Ugu we. Uma ishara.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Oh yeah, good. Mm. Yeah. Ah, good. Ah, good. 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 That. Yena mena robs tu di yigi chambro. Yeah.
Good morning, Katrina.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well. Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nga to dele Geshe-la.
Oh yeah, nga tu tele. Good. Oh, de pego kanta ta te do de. Oh, dam do dis. Good. Mena mena. Odu tongu de. Robs yigi chambro. Good. Oh yeah. I did. Oh yeah. Oh, of course.
Om Namo Manjushriye, Namo Shriye, Namo Tamashriye, Soha. Om Namo Manjushriye, Namo Shriye, Namo Tamashriye, Soha.
Good. Mm, mm,
Good morning, Ginla, Tashi Dele, and good morning, Katrina. And welcome to everyone who's joining us online. We'll begin with some preliminary prayers. You can find the link in the chat box. To the teacher endowed, transcend and destroy, the one that's gone, the foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one bound to bliss, no other world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you pay 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With your bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate, protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the false, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings and body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love. Let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Mandalakam
Oh yeah.
I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Tajik song gena.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's the case. What the thing got this. What kange chimnam yanda rabje. Buddhi sonam tamje rabjamde. Edan chebe dune rab dune. Janju chonyi tela chase lo. Dech. Akasira kulon chete tanam yude chigwara. Oh, tangma kibu chungwe semki basin mudu samle wandu chene. Ane wachima mare. Chechube tenju melu kebat chendi. Yiring duku tendu nengi chimeba. Jignero wachima dogu. Ane wachima kiwa lansa teluya ngendu ta tendu nyileme. Ngendu kiwa kiu tendu la sobarwa. O tendu likene tunge mambu yonya yorto. Ngeson le kiwa kiu. Simjala niri mecenala. Lunga yusum jukone shala tsawa. Cheba la soba shala tsawa cheba. Migiwa chute te kiu imbe. Ngeson je kiwa kane. Kiwa chimaya lada mi. Lutin kebar jen tobar chanyam. O ti chito. Ane niri mecenala ya. Lunga yusum jukone shala tsawa pane. Jini ji pemba chubu yin samsa samluki. O teni enjoyi milutia. Kiwa yuni tomne. Yendu le tede sambu yin jas. Kibu dringi samlu kogu yordo. Ile lo kyaru yakin ya. Simshu shiru dordo. Lotop shiru dordo. O teni ngeson le kiwa le tede lada mi. Kiwa de sambu yin jas. Yang tungeji rangshi chen samnerwa. Mila ikega nachi. Deba chayate menyewa medibu todo buawa. Tunge mambu yawa nga zungu sum tonde ura. Ne lala e tawa nashi tunge yore. Oti indi ko leda nyomu be wange. Susulu rawa mebo che pungbu dole che kwe na. I tunge ji rangshi madu mere. Leda nyomu be wange. Rala rawa mebo. Titu nyowe tendu pungbu chi lang. Ane te ya rawa meba ndor kuwe na. Tanda kichile rawa meba. O tenda chi ne kuwa te situ tunge ji rangshi le mende nyamdu. Ele tarwa che kuyo samde tarwa towa. Tunge le tendu tarwa tirwa. O tunge le tendu tarwa chi cha kuyo sam. E kyu kare sine ane. Ta meba. Nga samsa nga la ya rawa wanchimba. Ta la seba. Takiwa la seba. Akbar do seba. O tene yedo nga chula lakbar do seba la so. O tene seba yona ane tela. Teta linge kien tam mitin ba chonsuna ne kondru yongo ra. O tene ko 작당게 로데 코아지에 주소를 샤섬 이리 메세나올이야 진리지 작바 신샤 공도 나게 차도 드레심을 쏘고 그래서 코에 주를 샤섬에 진리 많이 오르뇨르다 된대전 타바토 그섬사 라지 부동에 타바 삼지 드마레 삼텔야 야케니 부침비 삼고 거기도 라지 부동에 기타로체나 젠세디 파마 녜니 돌려서과 나를 신도 집에니 심지어도 예월돈 대주던다 그게 마찬가지 그래서 란던도 동해지나 되어도 이거 통만 매반에 단대파도 예송다 미달라체 동해냐한테 단대 마오바나 두스테는 동해냐에 되어도 대주야 동해다 저와치 동근시 자고 그래서 대체도 라께 고세 연대 군대지 강사시된 줄고 그래서 악배 시행집에 자주고 셈 삼바상부 소술에 현다 개셔왔지 게 악배 시행집에 자주고 셈게 전대전에 산지지 고바 토바 자고요 심지어 탐제게 좀 게게 심지어 인노 저 일이 맞지베 심지어 인노 저 심지어 인바삼비에 텔라 소수 안유게 되네 팬도 제바 제통 게게 랑원에 네바 용수 소버거네 탑다 시르 상마 타시네 endo chetung gengi kansa chin jura cha samya sanje toba cha stibardo o tende chage ti chedung ne sanje ga so be chula so ba te zola te ba cha sam ba cha kom ba cha ne rimgi te da chage yin sam o te chedo ne chönye ge sam ulo se tam ne sam ba shos o this
No. So here to begin with, Geshe-la made a prostration to the Buddha, and here we should begin with a proper kind of motivation. As always, we should set our motivation by thinking about first kind of the level of the being of small capacity, of recognizing the life that we have right now, this sort of life of leisure and opportunity. When this ends, we have no other choice than to take another rebirth, either good or bad kind of rebirth. And so the cause of a bad rebirth, of one of the kinds of rebirths that is just in all suffering, is that kind of activity with body, speech, and mind that causes harm to others. And so with the sort of recognition that good and bad causes are what lead to our future rebirths, we should think that I will attain a good rebirth as a human or a god by, on a daily basis, avoiding any kind of harm with my body, speech, and mind toward other sentient beings, and accomplishing the sort of causes that lead to that rebirth. But recognizing that even if we are to gain a rebirth as a human or a god, this kind of life of leisure and opportunity, if we think more expansively, more extensively, we recognize that that kind of rebirth is still in the nature of suffering. So to think with a sort of greater power or greater extent, we recognize that even that kind of birth as, say, a human is not free from the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Taking up these kinds of aggregates due to the power of karma and afflictions, so long as we don't sort of reverse that, we are going to be in this cycle of suffering where we encounter all kinds of unwanted conditions. As humans, we encounter things that we don't want, or have to suffer things of not getting what we do want, and so forth. And so even as a human or a god, we aren't beyond that nature of suffering. And so wishing to gain a kind of definite freedom from this suffering cycle of existence, one makes an effort to meditate on selflessness, recognizing that this kind of grasping at an eye, this clinging to an eye and holding that as more important than others, leads us to engage with attachment and aversion. Those kinds of afflictive emotions, those things like jealousy and anger, attachment, hostility, as long as we are able to reduce those, if we could get rid of those, we would get rid of the causes of this cycle of continuing to take rebirth within this suffering samsara. And so that kind of wish, though, for our own liberation, we see as that's really not right. We look around and see that all of these other sentient beings, those that in this life have acted as our mothers and fathers, our friends and family, there are actually none who haven't acted in that way in previous lives. And to just strive for our own liberation is really not suitable. We see that we want to be able to help them get out of that kind of suffering. But right now, we don't have that sort of ability. So, beginning with this sort of attitude of holding the welfare of others as more important than your own, giving rise to this kind of bodhicitta attitude, we strive to attain that sort of state of one who is able to actually benefit all sentient beings without any kind of partiality. By perfecting method and wisdom, that sort of being, a Buddha, is able to benefit all sentient beings. And so we think, I am going to strive to attain that state of Buddhahood for the welfare of sentient beings. And for that purpose, I'm going to study, I'm going to learn, contemplate, and meditate on the Dharma for that purpose. So in that way, we should set a good motivation for listening to the teachings.
뭐야 당한주 그스 될래돼요 봐 셈비랑신 외세와 주만은 루보아세나 신로 셈비랑신 단 남바산게 봐 그래서 그래 뭐 산제이나 그 당분이네 산제이 뭐지 알레게 뭐가지로 어떤데 말이스 산제 좀 된데 나라줄 나갈펜 잡았는데 루루 까와체네 깔마부쳐네네 담마 산제벤 잡았는데도 어디 인데 고치다 택바침빌로는 산제다 은혜 산제사를 이난 전불을 패놓고 산제 대신에 산제벤 잡아줘요도 인주 산제 은혜 택바침부쳐는 은혜 산제사를 오미라이 내수 산제네야 리버트리시 전불을 패요도 이나 깔레cab고레스 깔레cab네네 산제고레스 대초직도달야 루루카와체는 또 이제 산제도 어디 인데고 산제 탑다시로 타르침베 아사카데시네 담부네 탑다시로 타르친짐바지 요마도 마라주나시 칼레캡 니 야르야 야르치니야 산케고요도 어디나 샹가라줄레 산제데 찍바 셈지랑신 찍바 요레스요도 독사꾼이 초실다 독베 산제 마부요레 때주고 심젤리아 코라캅스 밤네 추테네 산제가 송 우요레 온돌라메 코반데 기분데 기부침빌람람 고시게 우캅스 바바예나 데다테 송데 요새 주요도 독사꾼이 초실다 이신이 메시다스 가라조 셈다 응마 산제 샤게토바타부 셈니부데 네루데 찍바지냐요 마도 제바요 마라 셈비랑신 외사와 랑원에 주베 마체 랑와도 주베네 콘도체 나게셰 데치레데요 마라 어디에데코 셈비랑신 야르도나 야르도지게 안달 로부르지 티메팀땡게 어떤데 치요데 단계가 셈데다 간주 셈 통메 셈 찍바요 아래 저저 간주데야 야견저 요레서 거도 도사꾼이 초시다 신이 메시 리치나 루시고 따도 산제니 무체스 알아서 정말 산제가 저기 와래서 산제는 개통변가 저기 와래고 신이 리치나 루시고 따도 산제니 루시엔 정말 탐제데 따도 그 산제가 저기 와봐셔래서라 산제가 닝부 와봐셔래서 가셔서는 개발 가셔서는 가라도 상물을 산제 예외에서 그거래. 다들 주먹 봐 주먹이 셀토고요 말해서. 그래서 주먹이 봐 세나네 산제 예인바데 중앙게래서 그거라. 개발 가셔 때려한다 말해. 다들 산제요 말해. 산제 예외에 지가 릭디요 말해서. 주먹 로부터야 세게 전에니야 산제 용거도. 어디 손자 가서라. 얌네 타르도와 탑대시럽 타르도와 랑도르지네 탐제 타르심바 겐게 산제이네 당분이네 산제 아바랑중게 산제세르 데요 마레 심제이네 코코아 코르데게 카두이나 와라 코르데 코게지레 데요 마레 레아 타르나 타르바셔가 저 산제에 요레 어디 손자고 심제랑신 외세와레 만남 루루아레스 어디 또스토즈 가라조 하고 토구르와 메콘도 잡으시오시네 딱바리 셔버 꼼꼼꼼꼼 전에고 정말 콘도 사주면 그래 잘 누구여라 또 개반 누구여거든 알아서 하고 누구여라 control Lambeka do Saba Comgo, some Tengi Tambu, the weather control Lana, control Koran Rajamado, Savage, the Assembly Kogmado. Each year was some Tanga and a control in the session out, and Drimason, control dancer. Drimason, some Saturday. Control said the Chamade in Javashi. And the Neparuchilia, control Sadina, Namsating, control Sagmasam. Neparuchil come to the control Simon and get a chag, make you lamnake. In the Koyajan Dray, but the Garazo Hakudo. Lobjo Chingachi, Nako Tambuka, Shingi, Machima, Lobjo Chigachi, Jidendi, Nezu, the Chicago Shingi, the Yauri, Yauri, Chichima, Keva Jugdo. Read the man at Tambune Kuba, Vinekuba, around Degura, the Deku Madua, but in the Co, Onambeta Watelia. Tangma, Sanjaki Ryunge, Sanjesu, Tawaran Jungi, Tambunine, Sanje Yeva, yeah, Rawaja, Sanjak, Tibutu Kanga. Rawagi Ngazuya, Yawasang Buddha, Yambada, Yabuda, Tuba Kanga, Sutra, and get in this Yomara. Or Labjaka, or Sanja Kora, Yamuti, Nazula Sung. Nangazuya, Sanke at the Lamgala Chiki. Captain Bobby Channel out in the Yamado. Sanjaki and Etam Jamanam Sanchesha and out. You put them Japanam Sachuchin, Tachu, Large Chag, say, and the Messunga. Or did you Tati or Dichi and Yagura, nobody. Razu Yagetana Taju, some Simbi Rashi Yasawa. Oh, teach Lamia.
Mhm. So, in terms of where we had left off in the text, we were discussing the fact that, like it says, the nature of mind is clear light. The kind of stains that we have are adventitious. So here, it's not the case that a Buddha was from the beginning without making any kind of effort, already fully enlightened, but rather the Buddha, due to making a great deal of effort over a long period of time, was able to achieve this state of perfect, complete enlightenment. And so here, according to the Mahayana, although Buddha Shakyamuni was sort of like an emanation coming to the world to show through his various deeds how it is that we are able to achieve enlightenment, it's still not the case that that Buddha was enlightened from the beginning, was already a fully enlightened Buddha, but rather the Buddha had to make effort in terms of developing these qualities of method and wisdom to their perfection in order to attain that state. And so the Buddha demonstrated this through coming to the world, like going through 6 years of hardships, austerities, in order to then be able to perfect those kinds of qualities. But it's not just the case that the Buddha was perfected from the beginning. As it says elsewhere, that again, we all have the potential to become a Buddha. We have this, as it's sometimes called, this Buddha lineage. And here, this again is based upon the fact that the nature of mind is clear light. And these stains that we have, our sort of afflictions, are not in the nature of mind. Rather, they are adventitious. And here, this discussion of the sort of Buddha nature that we all have comes in a verse where it describes that the sort of enlightened activities of the Buddhas pervade everywhere. They are always sort of ready and willing to teach the kind of various stages of the path, how we go about actually improving our mind. So those sorts of teachings are available like without any kind of discrimination. And then it describes how the nature of our mind and the nature of the mind of a Buddha are no different, in that they are both of clear light. They are not sort of established from their own side, truly established. It's not the case that things like our anger or our attachment are somehow established inherently in the nature of our mind, such that they cannot be removed or eliminated. And so we all have the ability then, we all have this kind of Buddha nature. We have this sort of ability to improve our mind, to reduce those kinds of adventitious afflictions. It is this potential or this possibility that applies equally to all sentient beings. It's not as though the nature of the mind of an enlightened being and the nature of a mind of a being within samsara are somehow different. All beings, without without exception, are endowed with this Buddha nature. Now, some scholars take this and say that it means we all already have a Buddha within us, and we just sort of haven't manifested it yet. But this is maybe a misunderstanding, or rather, we all have this Buddha nature or this Buddha lineage, meaning that we have this kind of potential to become a Buddha, to perfect our knowledge and wisdom. It's not as though the Buddha, though, were perfected in knowledge and wisdom and ability from the beginning, but rather that due to the effort that they made, were then able to achieve that kind of state. It's not as though Buddhas or enlightened beings are always enlightened and sentient beings are just always in that state. And this is something that we can sort of know from our own experience. Like if someone is very angry, if over time they make an effort to develop their patience, they are able to reduce that. We can see the sort of difference for ourselves. If someone begins to see the sort of faults of their anger and thinks about the need to be patient and how important it is to be patient, then slowly over time, when they actually are starting to get angry, they'll be able to remember that and slowly reduce that. These are the kinds of changes and improvements that we can see in various ways with our own afflictions or with our knowledge, with our learning. There's people who don't know anything and then are able to learn the alphabet and learn to read or whatever kind of worldly subject they may want to study. It's not as though if someone's stupid, they just remain stupid all the time. So here, in terms of what a Buddha is, it's not a kind of perfected individual that is somehow permanent and self-arisen, somehow autonomously existent, that has the ability to sort of bring forth good and bad or suffering and happiness for other sentient beings. But rather, the Buddha has the ability to benefit others through his teachings by teaching them what they should and shouldn't do. As it said, a Buddha can't wash away sins with water, like washing away with water, or just give us realizations, but rather it is through teaching that we are able to, like the Buddha, improve our minds and become Buddhas.
Oh yeah. anganje de ba semjiran shewe se ware se pena chuda namga to so rangshin de ko tangma re se rangshin gi nyok ba ine ko aya ke yo mardo namga re ne tu da chimba de tende nyok de yo na agwari stus de urati de mudwa ko lubura so za ya ko chuda kenji so so na ya ko tangma re du do rangshin ko ra tangma so za chuye nyok ba che sa da tende nyok ne ko tangma so ya yor do rangshin de tangma so za o de so de ka so re ngara jo sem ge rangshin de ko tangma yak bu chi yo de si go ra ta de ko kombe wange paksha ge kombe wange ne ko do nga je tra do mi shi be mo bo le so ba ya ma bu chi yo do o ti ge tip de yo de zo ka ga so ji yo de si go ra o ne ka so do chu tu ji nyok ba tan de yo ba shin no de we na ra ni ye o chu chen de so zan si go ra rang ge le ni to zo ka ga so so chu chu tan yo ba chi so zan rang ge lak ba yo ba so zan de na ra ni ma on ba le ni chin de shi jo chen de da ne ma on ba le ya so so ya ga da do ka de shin jo ke na ju ro che ge chu dan che de ta da so so le da ye so so la ba yo de so da ju ro a se chen su shi ge ya da che ni ba shi ma yin ba o shen da che ge o wa me do tin de ro ju dan che ba bo ne shen da che ge nya wa yi da ten ro ku ba tin de so sha ye na ni cha so ya yo ma do mi shen da che su ya ti bu shen da che ne ba yo ge che su de so ya ke yo ma de se yo de o shen su che ge te da che ne ba shi ma yin ba to ta ge gun je ta ge che ne ba to ne so so ya be de so so che ne ba to ne se yo do a de nam de ta le yo ge ba simjian shen ji tin men ba simjian shen da che ge rang me ba chi che nya wa da yi da da ten ru da mi ko ba su me shin ge su on du chen su tin de so ya yo ma de che ra simjian shen ji tin men ba idu to de ba na ya wa lag ba de to ban de tu nge lag ba de te wa de ti wa ge tu tu be de la nor ne ro chen la cha wa la so wa tin de chen men be ne ni yong su le ni ke wa du ga da tu su ling ge wa de si go do oh ti du ka so 다게 군접 다게 전에가 돈에 에이규 미시베 몽바 세워다스 또 용사데 강가 마드에데 미시베 몽바게 용거도 삼루탄다 마신 버체 노르 삼루탄 안될 때는 노르 강가 용거도 따위 주도 그 미시베 몽바레 내주하고 신기는 지대네 따로 지대게 내루이네 따로 그다도다 강가 하고 신기는 아니 그 견도 용거 마도 마신에니 견도 용거도 어디 타르바다 탐제 캠보단 좀 밀류 주베 강가 소소 내주 하 미시베 왕게니 진실로라 주고요도 이게 미시베 몽바세와다 네 미시베 몽바세야다 네 잠제고네 샬레 서와봉바다 샤야 소소나시 tidu nyonggenjere samsamlo tukuyodo sadonashi 샬리아 가르체네 에메게 소소리아 도시치체나 때와동이 nyong게 인데시메 삼르다니오마도 소소나시 버주테 tidu nyong게레 삼테 소저 소소고네 샹달와 소체바다 참마체바다 코르체나 버주텔 동에게게 삼 와 보통에 매긴 게지는 사도나시니 켈랍샤네 케요마도 아티네 셰파주데 고 때와토 데반지레 데와레 인디코 소세 잠바 때와톰데 삼레 소교발라 소바다 로바시네 파주들 아용고도 인디 가서 세와다세 잠제고네세 아주 세와 빵고레 펜바 두구레 미게와 쭈빵고레 세데 싸와들야 잠바다 세와이 시송고와라 나게 템바데 그 인질의 시송고에서도 그래서 자와디 충주지 자와 첨부게 매네 콜로 통해는 지금 말에 삼사 삼을 시작하네 저와체는 지금 말에 삼고마도 당에 미세나 팀린 두구레 롱바게 팀당그레 쫄리 쪼구리 삼사테르스요 말아 이네코 진짜 하마고가 고급 청소는 그 미세냐가 요라 안데도 버주들 네그레 삼되네 그 데카디나 소액자야다 진짜 용거 말도 펜데 트로발라 학바르 쳔바 대다네스 진짜 삼루체 네 소소레 펜바 트로야다 네버 뽕야게 탑시 쳔게 간사 대주 네소도 쳔바 대다네 심제 타달라 타지도 펜바르 제베 심제 탐젤로 타지도 펜바르 제베 터두기 기부 데스월 다소소 쩔람 되었는데 야부 제베이나 심제 탐젤라 타지도 펜바 셰베 아니 지대 제바 보이다 군조 나라 출루간가 군조 레레레 켈레게라 아치도 펜바싱게 레레 켈레게라 근데 펜바 제베 이부 컨디션에 대주 또 기그레스고라 나 지대 제바 보케 말레나 상바로 지나 지대 제바 보레스 케 말렘 베체 소소 제야데 샬라 사와파 펜바투 메신 넘버 타바 체제 케레나 상바 가그리 마도 상바 공할이야 제바보 켈레마 소세 콘두사 음아로 원내시네 군디데라 전다 제디 아부지고 제자 지대 제바보 셴다 수여 공부 총에서도 근데 용구 말에 강가 가기를 해서고라 타지도 펜벌 제베 터두기 기부 아예바 탐제기 공부다 틈바이 베세 터두기 기부도 저거 심자신다 야가지 존나 두고 맞추나 삼 대탑시 장가 장 인구로 이 등어라서 근데 제외나니 그 제바보 강가 고랑 수업에서 켈레나 말레나 이게 콘도사고야 두 메게바 요야 말에서 정말 두 예배 줄은 두고마도 메게바 두 말에서 거라 터두게 때문에 대달라 학바르 그시 니베 제바 마시도 주로 앉아서 어디 터두게 기부 간대지나 줄로서서 터두 데베 제바보 간대지 켈링네 뜻서 가가 니베 줄은 두고마도 메가와 줄은 두고 말에서 거라 타지던 주로 이제 심지어 샬라 너바 제바 남네 대다만어 텐데 멤버체 네 군조다 제 시부지세 네 심지어 샬라 세와다 너바체 저 버루질 쇼이 베스로 제 요르도 타와초스 마와세 텐데 제베네 공고네 파조 미삼을 당신게 군조에네 가리네티 두 예지 연구 말도 그래서 다가서 미탐에 보이네 밀리안 너바시제 누구시지 다는데 꼭 가고 용무도 아가테 마드리 삼사테기도 어디 버티지 주는 데도 이제 심지어 내가 집어넣는 데 대달 많이 넣었어요.
So here again, picking up in the text, and this is in 51 in the English, it says again, the nature of our mind is clear light and our defilements are adventitious. So therefore we can transform ourselves like that. Just as the pure nature of the sky and water can, respectively, become free of dust and mud, our minds can become free of defilements. So if it were the nature of the sky to be sort of like blocked, if the clouds were in the nature of the sky, it would be no way to clear them. But it's not like that. We have the ability. It's only due to the sort of habituation that we have created to these kinds of afflictions. We have this fundamental ignorance and the kind of pride and jealousy and anger and so forth. But those are not permanent. They are things that we can get rid of if we make this kind of effort. So consequently, we do not need someone else to determine whether we will be good or evil in the future. We can do it ourselves now. We are our own refuge and protector. Seeing this, we must make a great effort to eliminate the cause of those faults, the ignorance of not knowing, and through love and compassion, abandon harming others and provide them with help and happiness. So here again, it isn't up to some kind of a creator deity to place us in somewhere like the hell realms or as a preta or a hungry ghost. It's not something that can be done by someone else, but rather it is up to us and the sort of causes that we are creating now as to what kind of results we will experience in the future. This is explained in a verse in the Pramana Vartika where Dharmakirti says that we aren't sort of led by others. It's not as though some sort of a god or a creator is able to lead us into these various realms, but rather it's due to being mistaken about these various causes. So when we have this kind of, in particular, this fundamental ignorance or delusion about the way that things are, we then are ignorant as to the causes that will bring about suffering and the causes that will bring about happiness. So if we don't know the situation well, understand well, then we can't expect to achieve something like liberation, the state of omniscience, or even a good rebirth if we don't have a proper kind of understanding of what are the causes and what are the effects. And so here, when it comes to the kind of causes and effects, we need to then abandon harming others. In terms of abandoning harming others and also providing them with help and happiness, we need to do this on the basis of coming to recognize that others are exactly like us. We shouldn't view other sentient beings as being sort of like rocks or stones or things that don't have feeling. They are sentient beings who also want to have happiness and don't want to suffer. And so here, when it comes to our actions, we should be refraining from things like harsh speech or sort of violence, harm toward others, out of a recognition that such actions create suffering in another sentient being. And wanting them to have happiness, then we do things that are beneficial and helpful to them, recognizing that they too have feelings and wanting to bring about their sort of happiness. So here, as the Buddha has repeatedly described, really compassion is the foundation. It isn't as though we are engaging in this kind of refraining from harm or refraining from certain actions because they are, say, against the law. If that's the only reason why someone is not doing something harmful, then when no one's looking, they might try to like get away with it. The law being the only sort of thing restraining them from doing that is not good enough. Here, it's really based upon a sense of having love and compassion for other sentient beings that will cause you to sort of act well in your conduct, in all of the ways that you interact with other sentient beings. You will try to be loving and compassionate, refrain from harming them, and benefit them as much as you can. And so those who do so are in complete accord with the intention of every perfect being there is, who is consistently helping living beings. So say you're someone who asserts there is some kind of a creator god like Ishvara or Brahma or something. If you were to act this way, where you are trying to refrain from harming others and trying to benefit and help them as much as you are able to, that would be pleasing to that kind of a being. Such a being only wants the best for all sentient beings. They only want good things. So you would be acting in accordance with their kind of intention. There's not, at least among those that are asserted, a god that's somehow like wanting suffering for the sentient beings. So if you are, it doesn't really matter whether or not one accepts that there's a creator deity or not. If you are acting in this way as sort of seeing other sentient beings as precious and trying to not harm them and bring them benefit, then as it continues in the text, therefore it is an offering that brings these ultimate sources of refuge, only superior reverence and pleasure. So if you do accept such a perfected being that is in the kind of nature of love, then to act toward their creation with such love would only be to act in accordance with their intention. Whereas it is not like this for those who harm living beings. To see somehow your like deity or your precious, whatever it may be, like whether it's the precious, the three jewels or some other sort of whole creator being as precious, and then to turn around and to harm other sentient beings, whatever kind of deity or important sort of source of refuge you may assert, that would be against their intention. It would not be in accordance with their intention.
다들 공장계어라. 과세 출론 시작엔 돌레세. 유산지 소베 도치도가 과세 출론 시작엔 도치. 도디날이야 예베던 다들 강강 공부를 두고 두두시지수 송샵 식제 주제 송샵지어라. 일리안에 심전 고아를 잡에 식수 잡아서 공부를 제라. 심전 고아를 잡에 식수 잡아서 유도난 소샵 강가 우르르 쇠셔라. 디날 송샤셔라. 다든다 산지 송래. 심전 남라 초도 페나 달라 초조 인세. 심전 남리야 배 hen도 첨부체베이나 엘라 산지라더니 펜도 첨부체베도 찍고 인세. 근데 심전 남라 초도 페나세. 심전 남리야 펜도 첨부체베이나 네 산지리야 초베티 인송거래. 초바스는 니바 주바들 초바스거래. 니바 주바들. 고아 제바들 초바스거라. 나가도 바이네고 माता पिता के पूजा करना चाहिए सिर्फ पूजा से तो से फमाले अच्छबा फिर से तो ये बच्चों को रे से वाला और जो छबा फिर से तो साजे तो ये बच्चों को वाला तो ये बंगोने ते छबा याशो दे करे से समझे लिया दो तो ये तो रे वाला समझे नमला छोड़ पहना ताला छबे छोड़ जो वाये छबा याशो दे और जो समझे लिया के कंटूते करे छे को ना छे ने सांजेल कैप्स छबा पिवरा और डेयो मारता दा सोगयारे सांजे या चे ngara छबा पिवदे सोसाये तंदारे मातो सांजेले छया मेबादा छनानि ची तो गेबादा छया माबेने माजे देके यो मारा सुसुसनम साये तंदा पिवरा नातिको 심전리 아틀레 자고 엔도 छबेने छबे छो도 जोबे सोगयारा 심전 남라 छो도 페나 네 말라 쳐줘야 사제를 쳐배 쳐도 인송거 심지어 남라 네배 쳐내 말라 네쳐 심지어 남라 네배 깨베네 사제를 네배 쳐도 줘버티 인세 두 메게 봐 둘을 마봐 용기어도 통고부 용고 말와 내가 심지어 남네 때다 동에 손대베스 말아줘 미래지 또 붙여서 가져 결혼 와 냠뇨 여세라 그런 소화된가 냠뇨 여세라지 세요로 산제데 자주 서버던 거네 소환냠요요라 아다 심제남네 때다 동에 초대베서 우리 대화초는 소소 두기야 우리 동에 전에 두 맞줘야 어떤데 정말 예수 두 냠뇨 예세르지 가시 심제 너지 되네 달라 지대로 거스 네 심제는 너바체 네 산제를 겹수치 선배바치기도 세 이 가르젠 지고래 선거너 산제데 개바 망보 심제 같은 쪽 심지어는 펜버 마시도 심지어는 너바세 이 너바세야다 펜버 주베게 협초도 줘봐 Diba yon soba che yon ya tanda sanje, eba mambu kule kyunchi tanda sanje yorwa. Simje dandu sanje kdo. O che zati, simje le neba che ne sanje liya, neba che ne kyabs che yagure se, kari che ne yagure se ne. Sanje ke simje ke tanda thoma tu kiba ne, chawa pa kibu chungu kabsu chawa pa. Ane tak shen yam ba she, tene tak ba shen she ba che. Eba mambu kule kyun tanda kyun se yende kunde re yorwa. Icha ne nga zu ku shep chigi wara. Simje tanda le tambu tu kiba ne sonde ne tiba to kule kyun. Sama simje tanda le ya. Rwa shengi tanda chimba tsuden saba samde sa lo ne. Ne tar shimbe kibu kyurwa. Icha ne ta tanda ya. Icha ne tenpa chogoro mato. O kyabs che ti yagure samge wara mato. Ina ne simje le ya ti che ya de. Ke chimbu tse uyo Ashi simje neji dine tala chidar kuya. Simje le neba che kaya ke nawa madan kondu che chado che den simche sa den simche so che ti che na. Sanje le ya kya shio she ku shio chaka che de mandibri sungu wara. Yondan ge wari de kituwa. Sanje le ku shio che de simje ke tuen tu bata. Simje le penpa tu dunga de trawe che du tinde nawa de yakure sha singa che su yiran yoyos che. Deba kigi wara. Nya tsujo de jide ina direce amara chi yubche, tila pura chi tsachim shivchi yubche. Ani utile tubu tanchi te ama yasa. Ama liyabe yabu shivchachi, ama de kaya yo maro. Yagu maro ko. Ati na shinchire ndo. Ya tichi tuna.
So here, as a source for this, citing a verse then from Nagarjuna, and this is a sort of a commentary on Sutra. And here, the Nagarjuna says in his verses on respecting living beings. So here, to be of the utmost help to living beings is the best way to venerate me. So the Buddha. So here, when we talk about sort of an offering, and here it's translated as sort of venerate, but we often use this word to make an offering. And to make an offering, the purpose of doing that is something that pleases someone, that makes them happy. So when we think about sort of in India, there's this culture of sort of making offerings to your parents. That's doing things that will please your parents, that will make them happy. So here, if again, to read the rest of this verse, it says, to greatly harm living beings is the greatest harm to me. Living beings and I are the same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. How can whoever harms living beings be respecting me? So here, if we think like, oh, I'm gonna go make offerings to the Buddhas, like sort of make an offering there, and then we turn around and just sort of get angry at whoever we're going to get angry at, or we are like, okay, we're going for refuge and we're doing generosity and these sorts of things, and then we turn around and just engage in our afflictions, it's very sort of counter to what we are doing. We are trying, through the process of making offerings, trying to accumulate merit. And those kinds of things, like getting sort of angry at others, is undermining exactly what we think we are trying to accomplish through those activities toward the Buddha. So to be of help to living beings, to be of the utmost help to living beings, is the best way to venerate me, the best kind of highest form of offering in terms of pleasing the Buddha. Again, an offering is something that pleases or brings joy to the mind, is to be of help to sentient beings. And the greatest sort of harm in terms of like, you can't actually harm a Buddha, but make them displeased, is to harm living beings. And so here again, the Buddha is sort of like, whatever we inflict upon sentient beings, it's as though the Buddha is feeling that. Like when they are happy, the Buddha is happy. When they are feeling suffering, the Buddha is unhappy. So here, if we harm living beings, that's like the greatest way that we could displease or harm the Buddha. So again, the Buddha became a Buddha, perfected, developed all qualities and removed all faults in order to be able to benefit sentient beings. He became such a perfected being in order to be able to help others. And so here, this is the sort of benefiting sentient beings is the highest kind of offering that we could make. It is for the sake, again, of being able ourselves to achieve that state in which we have perfected all good qualities and removed all fault, becoming a perfected being such that we are able to then turn and benefit beings as much as possible. So here, if we are to, we should recall that these are the sorts of reasons that, like, these are the reasons that we are engaging in these kinds of practices, that we are accumulating merit is for that sort of purpose. But if on the one hand, we're doing things like sort of making offerings to the Buddhas and then turning around and just getting angry at whoever we want to get angry at and getting jealous and getting competitive and continuing to kill whoever we're going to kill, then that's very much it's undermining all of the kinds of offerings that we are trying to make to the Buddha. So as this last line says, how can whoever harms living beings be respecting me? Any sort of harm that we inflict upon other sentient beings is displeasing to the Buddhas, is disrespectful. It's sort of like if we again have like a mother who really cherishes her child, and you treat the child really badly and then turn around and try to please the mother, there's no way that she's going to be happy so long as you are harming her child. And so too with the Buddhas, it's so long as we are harming sentient beings, there's no way that we can think, oh, I'm making offerings to accumulate merit and so forth.
Oh yeah. 다들 도대나 송셰부터 담아 되는 시에도 나 도나 산제제 템바르 보신 지된들 지된들 셀통 여바 이시도소라 산제 템바 네 지된 잠불이 되나랴 세부체는 네바 이시도스겨라 예 파르도스겨라 샬라 펜베 초도 줄바세 로아네 샬리아 펜베 초도 주베 샬라 펜도 여바시고 요레스고라 아초다 셴조 시니레 매바르 냠버 차고 셰스 기부 데체마도나 기부 총우다 지나 소소케 셰바레데 소소케 쳔나 미션다 주소션달 네베게 마르와 이로와 아틀리아 다르체네 아초다 셴쇼세 케바메베세 시바타야 기부 링링도 기부 쳔버르제네 아초다 셴쇼 메베세 소소레 셴쇼 셴강가 케쇼치기도 란직시안에 셴강가 케탁베 셴체바싱고라 오 근데 다 가르쳤던다 소소로 림바다 이림바다 tim바나 시치 케토바치고라 근데 가서 이시도 셴라 햄베 쇼도 줄바 아쇼다 셴쇼 시니리 메바르 냠네 자고시 상마 다완돌라 동에 메도가 치바레섬 농바이나다 미리이나다 출루이나다 소소소 대체들의 상마 다완돌라 동에 메도가 치바레섬 아주다 콘조시 최고 전에 그 일이 지역에 요 말도 심지어 탐지고 소소 또다 한번 좀 계셔질 때 그러마도 년도 때 그러마도 잘다에 요 말도 안바체나 라시에 된 놈은 베타다 미시베 모베타 스티니 타레시고 마 심지어를 따다에 메르도 다 지대 용달을 고타요 아르테 인도네시 추네시 제나데 따다에 요 말을 선고라 인디오 가서다 니레 메바 네버 차고 셰스 사게라니게 사게라니게 심장기 때도 교암베베 야와라 초와른 제베세 사게가 되는 심장기 달리아페 그래 마부죠네 그래 가디 잡고네 틀에 교암메바 제베 가시 쪼시는데 생겼다 에바 마부 트벌 때네 사게가 와라 사게라니게 심장기 때도 교암메베 대화라 조아르제베 동해대 자야다 대화란 거에 전달이야 우리 간데 연하고 강에도 맞서라 제가시 조시도네 제번제가 제게로 와시거라 제베 어때 제세 사게 계신부스에게 심지에 대남라시거라 동해게 교화지나 가라주 고줄이야 동해 제제 semba chokuya kola tunga yongya lega cheba inaso ta shenla sawa cheba inaso neva kere inaso gora simje namla se sanje go tinde ke chimbu chi simje te zulya unje tanda la keba mangbolia yo yongya ta tunga me yo dal tabshin senge tezo tungeji kyawar chebe kyaw tedane se o semje liya tungeji kyawar che tunge mambu yon chora o tende chege semje se tu atun se yora semje ti tongda bumda ma se ri tu shegara o da de ne sungara tungeji kyawar che bas chale tunge tene semje to yi kyo ko ba chebe yena se ne kyaw tedane kyaw tedage lu chowe tendo 세지 쇠자 닝분배 버 송소세 kondu kalase sombuche ten tandake yo marese re shal pemba tuye mebe tolia shal nebeche jide ka mi mambulia simbeki wase tungete chete de yora tandake yo marese kalase mase yo ma somazu yo marese wara aranzu chanju sembazu samsal mitikwa mambu sange to zen joba shiwa shoso malam kya yora kuneba ne samgi yo mar pembe chene But in the sun, in the Butung, shooting young good. Telephone your shisha, Achima, the Tinder at the Wembasaga, some Congiora. Oh, Tinder this or. You are cheap, Simjan Tenamne. Tungaji George, Beto, Dani, Rangi Lusoetondo, Sagi Suja, Yingbutum ever some sauce. Rangi Lusoetondalia, Kalasaja Sobo. Which day, Yena got tanda, in Butanda Kayo Maresra. Jideshima pay at a rather shall pay at Tandaka who colored the set the bushes, rather she can get to me, you saw the Yora. Oh, never soon so say. The Dianas at up as a chulus and Donald Sanjay Sunshas still lunta Yorta. Simjan Gorge of a Chevale. I temba chisi draw the Nasena was Sanjay Temba, Sanjay Chu, the Bulin dinner chisi to savage and never to see to Sungora. Then now, oh, to see Shanla Chok Bensi. You see Shanla Chok Bent, I say, yeah, but never yo, Shanla Chok the Pemba reaction, but the never the Sora. You see Shanla Chok Bent. I never never so they want to me do the shan, they want to let to me do the some. Or the Duzako, so sweet they want to me say to the Shalia, so much of a shed. Junet, really love was a shell of pember to wish. Really love was Junet, like with Shanji, but you ought to do. Never check wood is over. I say, shall I chop it? I say, never, I say, never, you say. I simjen to do nyami chornamlas. Sanjay Rani is simjen to do roa. And if simjen tamje to do. Go on, never says it. It and the Kazakuli Jakuna, Chimbatala Sobara, Lucimbala Soba, Mabuyo, Sanjay, and Jusembekavia. Zukavia, Kokashin, Toshimato, go on, maybe simje. Simjen to Truba Namlas Gora. And then Chazutini. Sanjay Jobs Chess and it George again. Simjang Dennis George Kishunga, Kishunga. You lead this hedge, Sir Yanimbu Mesa. Alas, and Nico, I certainly Sabuchetana. Nimbu Yomar, Tonda, Joachima Pengel, Tonda Yomar. Joachima Pengel, Noya, Sendela, Noya, Rankanka, Rada Shankanga, never get to Mesha, and Calasan, Sabuchetana could wear his mother. Yaga Yomato. Oh, this Sundaya, Ishkuna.
So, here, commenting on this verse by Nagarjuna, it says, so long as the precious teaching of the Buddha is evident in this world, we should offer the utmost help, maintaining an impartial attitude without being partisan, thinking us and them. So here, as long as the Buddha's teachings are here in this world, as long as they remain, we should try to have this kind of attitude of wanting to benefit others as much as we can. Now, Now, this again, this sort of impartial attitude and wishing to benefit, there are different sort of levels of people's capacity. At the very least, for a being of small capacity, they're still going to hold themselves as more important. But at the very least, they should recognize that you shouldn't harm those that you consider to be other. And those of medium capacity can come to see the sort of self and other are equal, have that kind of sense of equality, of impartiality between us and them. And those of the great capacity are able to see others as more important, really recognizing the sort of other as being more important. And so here, then it continues saying, the Buddha brings joy, freedom from sorrow to living beings for their welfare. So here again, the Buddha, having begun with this kind of recognition that we should try to emulate, of recognizing that all sentient beings are the same in wanting to have happiness and not wanting to suffer. It doesn't matter where we came from, sort of what our race or our religion is. We all should be seen as a being, sentient beings who want to be happy and don't want to have to suffer. And so as a Buddhist, one should see all sentient beings as like friends, as like loved ones. There should never be seen as an enemy. The Buddha has identified that there are really only two enemies, our sort of ignorance, or one could say nescience, this lack of knowledge, and our enemy of the afflictions. These are the only two real enemies. Other than that, sentient beings are not to be viewed as enemies. And so a Buddha, here where it says the Buddha brings joy, freedom from sorrow to living beings for their welfare, it's also that the Buddha engages in a way that is without any kind of sort of difficulty or sorrow or sort of trouble mentally. The Buddha engages with joy. They don't think of the activities of working for the welfare of sentient beings as being difficult. It's something that they engage in happily, trying to bring forth the happiness of other sentient beings. And so continuing, it says, he says that there is no point for those who bring living beings sorrow and suffering to even sustain their own bodies with food. So here again, it said that those who there's no point in sort of satisfying oneself, sort of keeping your body going, if you're only bringing suffering to sentient beings, only causing them harm. It's said that bodhisattvas sometimes sort of make the prayer that someone who is, say, engaging in activities that are constantly harmful toward others, that kind of person that's just doing negative things, a bodhisattva might pray that they actually die quickly, that they sort of stop engaging in those kinds of actions that are going to bring forth future suffering, that they move on to another rebirth rather than continue the kind of actions that they are. So if one is acting in that way, even if you are to remain alive in this way, you're not benefiting yourself or others in the future. So again, based upon this kind of attitude of impartiality, recognizing that all sentient beings are equal in not wanting to suffer and wanting to be happy, as this verse again it's a commentary by Dangarjuna, the verses on respecting living beings. It's a commentary on this tidal wave sutra. It says, so long as my teaching is clearly present in this world, offer the greatest help, impartiality toward all. So not seeing some as close and others as distant. For those who bring sorrow to living beings, to whom I equally bring joy for their welfare, there is no point in even sustaining their bodies with food. So here, the Buddha does this kind of work of engaging in the kind of activities for the welfare of sentient beings. So someone who is actively sort of harming others, it's really not even, there's no point just to sustaining oneself with food. You're not bringing about any kind of benefit.
근데 쇼로같이 도와도 라고 말을 주대 신사를 되려.
Oh,
샤야 세들다 샤야. 가담베 계외신이 남주 송주실라세. 가담베 계시 소야 깨지파 남주 감에 송당시와래 라스와라. 송주실라세. 하르바다 탐제 캠바 토반 데와 남지 대체의 신이 유대세 하르바다 탐제kim바 토바른 되베 가사 속에 소남다 이시기 초사사게 에르와 신가스네 메도 같은데 니 요레세 소남 신도 소남 이신 니 요레세 지데 산지다 주야르와 람데바버 이때 심전 소리에서 거라 아주 소남 이신이 상고 말하고 어리 겹사게 신이 삼 어제긴 아주 섭섭하고 삼사 따다한다 거라 들으시와라 소남 지신이 상고네 저는 어때서 소남 지신이 상게다 심전 일에 저 소남 사사가 신그레서 거라 열릴 때는 뒤나네 심전리야 야부제 뱀바전에 라야야 그래 심전리야 네발을 쏘봐 심전의 신들라 쇠답에 두제 때문에 라를 두고 용해야 돼요도 대체어도 뛰어야 돼요 심전 남리야 되네 저와 제발 때네 심전을 따다만드니 거기 어랭에서 저기 어레 산제 고마 두고요 말아 딜이야 개체슈스니 아치되니까 예서 매기와티 용도와 작당 안에 심전 작당 버드 타르와 티토고도 라레 심전 셴다 개체어치네 산제 고반 티토고도 개체슈데 심전 세고요라 라주 심전스데 개체슈 맞으체 섭소치 까리 겹서르시다 치 갑대 자서르치 삼로코데여라 나와딘 디고 마르성거라 가담베 기술 손들레 하루마다 탐제 캠버 토반 되반 남게 개체의 신리에 대해서 신선이 요래 선음사사 지네 람담바부 산제레 와 산제를 겹수여서 겹담바보더와 이번에 덤베 람담바다라 덤베 람담바부 산제 가르소서는 심절에 차와 보세 니께와 삼불랑그리소라 심절에 딱초다 셴조 마치세 착당바나 타르바토 그리소고라 심절에 란레 심절 개체와지 산제 고반 토그리소고도와 어때인데 이번에 덤베 람담바다 산제 마 람담베산데 손남지 신르와 어때 가르소도서 람가 가르텐도스는 어때 심절에 따다테 숨송고요도 동해대 전도지 닝지 유도 주베 유르베 심제소 동해 녀den게 동해대 전도 닝지 유도 주베 심제대소다 야와 톰나 삼베 참베 유도 주베 네 대외 풍베 심제대소 송고요 레셔라 전남지 신대소 참베 유도 주베 야와다 덴도지 심제 남 인라세 손님 속에 신이 나네 지워 심제대 지 상계레셔라 하루마다 탐제 캠버 토반 되반 남지에세 하루마다 탐제 캠버 토반 되반 남지에세 네 남지 상계다 심제 니레세 상계대 손남지 신레 심제대 손남지 신레 되어라 심제를 제반 진고 벌송세 심제대 개체와 지고레셔라 산제가 남등교 하라 심제 개체와지는 산제 송디 개체와지기도 와 인르지 심제를 써봐 심진이리 자담마지 딱바시지 심제 개체슈션 송교 하라 어디인데 따티 가르소라 이 개체부지에는 산제 개체부지와 단도요 하라 이 멤버장 아주 산제 잡던 법에 메셔네 손남도 싸고래 yap수 치스제 겹템바보다 람야고 심제 된전이 진짜 꿀레게 뭐 텔리 제수이라지니 겹순 두고라 인데 티마테에 심제라 따다들들 따고레스 마송고라 텔리 남메 제나니 되게요 마토 티순다 가소래 심제 남라 지금 진고 마송세 알아주 가세 타바 탐제 타바다 산제 고반 토반 되반 남게 이 심제라 지금 진고 마송 가게시네 직대바 치다 디나는 담는 거지. 일단 직대바 주다 삼로 딴다 거라 배 맨라샤 그래서 직대바라와 소소 딴다 두고 소소 개셔와 치고래네 소소 쇼다 신다 쇼체 메세코란 두 개셔로라 그래서 나신 로샤나네 건 직대는 주다들 마도 최고 주다는 말해셔라 직대 탐제다 삼로 딴다한다 쉐바치다 맨라샤 거래서 미팅바치 거래서 거라 간데 거래서는 혼자가 상계 제야 겹데 개심부치야마도 심정을 떠나시다 맹게시대 그래서 아주 때려 말에 개시슈 따서도 마 심정을 남주 삼로 따다다 시도와 대서 개시슈 그래서 거라 산제 고캡된 거 보선자 되 계신 분은 산제 공부도 주고 왔던 거죠. 산제를 막고 버자야 메죠. 산제 막고 봐요. 산제 또 학과도 기그래. 산제 공부 되러 왔는데 제가 좀 심지어는 때는 마 둘도 두고래. 심지어는 따다 야부지는 야루 두고 와라. 산제 또 기그래 마도 지 산제 또 방금 말도 제가 학과도 개백줄을 두고래서 와라. 그만 되면 남자 산제다 심지어니래. 심지어는 제발은 진 거여서. 뭐나 어디 집안 친구 관계 시나서 유생 가래서는 랑이 되는 거래 랑이 체되다 세치만 남소 심제 남기 아마다 년데 에체데 진기 장외 아 심제 가시 소소 파마다치 아마 장자 말 파르셰바 마르셰바 년도셰바 조고셰바 조모셰바 라게 부담 포모셰바 소소 가래 제슈센델베 제슈 아슈 가리나 어디나시 요한가만 없어 심제신다 교류어레 삼자tin데 삼나리래 하르시바다 마르시바다 부르시바다 충마르시바다 뜻 강가 자요래 또 지단에야 파다 마데 개체슈 순자 뜻이거라 어디도 가서 라니 첸데다 원지 체럽 남수 심제 남게 파다마 년딜레 소버tin데 마주바요 마레 삼수수 개체슈 가르치고 나티나시 요한가마 요로 저 띵가마 요로 저 장메 바소자 근데 다음에 요래서 심지어 네가 예보를 천디 장자 챙기를 봐도 띵에만 삼아 챙기고 말아가지고 띵에만 가져가지 예지 때서 소소 요한가마를 밀루를 나네 밤마다 년디 천디를 하고면 유지라 근데 제사라 어떤 딴데 가와 깨되나 하고 해요 말아 소소 된다 와야도 연주를 된들레 유셰시 밀레 유셰시라 하고 말아 이나고 남아게겠다 그 말아 영원히 하고 공경외시로 연결이 나와 삼년의 신에 교황아마도 단단데 샤샤 삼semle 소이 제심을 쉬우시온 거라 아주게 하마고자 개요 말도 단다 소소 개시슈 챈들 가래 개시슈네 티나시 요한의 교와 만보 예도자 근데 마주베 심전디 교르디 마주르세 매버지르세거라 지단의 교와질라 신제들래야 아마 년들에 소바란데 드와이네다 매년다 정말 지그질 거진 시제 땅고래 진정 개발이제서도 진정 개발이제서 근데 디레르 딘데 규를 삼다로 진정 개발이제서 등가라도 지조라시나 단당한도 대도 강바에서 여러 칼라사야 여러 강가 론도치 튕기 강가도 이 미션다 칼레 겸용 거라 소소 디 강가서 말와 람가 소셔도 람가 대보시 드야 여러 송간하지 연이냐 여러 아예 중요한 배분제 딘체 여러 또 강가 미션다 거든데 용 거라 근데 삼을 따시도 미가가 들어진 로데요래 찍지 로고제 로데요라 로고 삼기 오마라 빼셔수에 삼 로데요라 거든데 죽을래야지 수에 삼 로데요라 마도 삼을 따시나 잘 팬도 시간 루요라 이 삼을 따고요라 내가 지가 내 고철이 조려요라 남버체나 잘 팬배던다 두고요라 아마다 제 천재 소야제 된데 있는 관심마도 신 강가 이게 로고제 된 거를 세지를 되어라 어디 인데고 진정 개발이셔서 무슨 딜레고 대신부리 되어라 안가 봐서 직질을 떼내는 소소 소야다 내고도 단단 가서 진도스 되어라 아 우르수다 진짜 마저도 숙침부 쉬지 겨우 내는 거라서 가가 미지서 살아 알레셔르는 미셔르는 되게 하고요 말아 그래서 샬 떼는데도 남준에 뜻이요 아주 그제 날씨여래 그래서 뭐 샬이야 가서래 샬이야 해마도나 내가 마셔는 때 줄이해서 줘라 라케제 줘라래 셈버 지주주스 라래 셈버데 라케에 주인스라래 엘리션다 가고 줘래 라래 셈버 라케발 펜타에 가려서거라 어디서 우거와도 세르던데 도와 그다음에 같이 미카리네 고칠로 카리네 미네 드르 삼세 밤로든데 샤치 담르다 지도 어디지도 원에 대시할 내가 마셔나 펜타에 지레데 도와 시디지 야부지 대요라 간주 마주 잼밤라샤 다 대체 간주 챤나 니 소소티 간주 지 초대는 소투 말아 킬로미터 깨라 잡지 상승셔야나 내가 맞아야 돼 배도고 소리지 레도 왔습니다 그 고주르진 도 왔습니다 신의 짠도 같은 치소다데 그 해마도나 그래서 내가 맞아야 되네 그 수수께로시 야부지 소체 대주거리 유리에서 펜터요 거기 펜터요 그래서 왔다 내가 맞아야 되는 펜터요 그래서 와라 아주 남비 그 내가 맞아야 되는 펜터가 너 어떤 데신데 펜터에서 저 진짜 개발진세 지그질 또는 델데 시버지 파서 델데 요라 소시치 보지 되는 토토에 되는데 제가 요 말아 어디서 진짜 개발진세 근데 상단도 강가 트린션보다 더 연근의 시지 차기 와라 근데 상단한테 되면야 딜레 공부 새 토어지나 남긴가서 딱 생냠지시기도 아 대완돌로 동해 면도라 동해 참무사에 면도 대화 충주시나 강가 공개를 되어라 이나신 미 강가를 심지어 강가를 아삼교하래 어디 인도자나 대완도네 대화 두교하래 동해신 면도네 동해실교하래 샤야 직벌을 봐 삼교하라 현재 대화대 두로 세고를 강에도 새로 세고를 했음 안데 직벌에도 도와삼 된데서 밀로 아차 인도체도 된데 삼을 다네야 야가를 연구하나 바다마다 시레레레 된데서 인체와 견자 삼을마다지 이단 그 대화들을 통해 면도가 장자를 해서 인데 삼을 다네니 고야 셈베트에다 저파에다 어디 삼을 고야야 야가를 지우고도 인데 연구하다 어디로 가서라 야 누가 질래서 하다 다른데 뭐시까지도 말라면서 가발는지 뭐시 다른 가서 나저디 좋아서 코로나 샤마라 나저디 좋네는 전부 강가 지실 겹지셔서 근데 진짜 나저디 강가 냠도 매고 서고를 삼을 거서 강가란데 매서는 뒤삼 삼을 안에 뒤에면도 강가 간주 내시 현대 강가 나고 전부 코로나 매고 차나 삼을 이제 코르고를 차서 어디서를 코르고를 세거를 다던다 야 강가시나 랑이 친데다 건지 싫어나 어머니들서 되지 동해와 맞아자 라니 동해와 제베 어라 심지어 현다 어디서 라니 친데다 건지 처럼 남서 심지어 남지 한마다 년대서 어르 제대 전기장여세 심지어 신 수식이 와메도 동해와 맞아자세 이탈리아로서 심지어 현대 수식이 랑왕메도 동해 양주인데 징계가 말해서라 라니 동해와 제베 냠타바 임베스 소소소소 대wan 돌 동해 면도버레데 대와 두베기 주데 두마시 동해세 주데 두마시 차당게 원도 소니 샹라 차와라 소과 삼방엠바 코르제 티치고노 오티치데네 코 대wan 되장 티모베랑게 대와 타다르 좀 세레 주주나 som바나시 대wan 되고래 동해 면도버레데 드데와라 대와 두나데다 동해세 들려아니야 차당당아시 샹라 차와다 텐데세네 주디 노르게와라 대wan 되장 티모베랑게 대와 타다르 좀 세라 저 누구의 삼교하다 그 제대 동해여야 주체 소소 대화들 다나시 소소소소 봐좀 쉬어도 배워서 쉬어도 송교하다 라니지 동해와 제바 임베세 다게 심제 태 딱베 란든 타르바다 탐제 켐바 쭉 나 누가 마셔 란레세 심제 라 제바라 제그베 소주 산게 자주 semba 탐제 tu ngushi wa tende chebe na ni choju sanje de 자주 semba 탐제 tu ngushi niebe chodu gyurwa imbe na sanje le semje chebra jingu bar sung de se dare a kadambe sung turbules ade chidang araje la lapche chira 야 접수셔도 약보들와 소사거다 이래 개쳐도 남주 심제된 로디시디 이날 개가 삼로 들려버셔 띠게 침부치 우레세 이송겨라 조주 상계대 저주 sem바 탐정 구시 예배 초도 교르바 예배 상계레 심제 제벌 전구바 송데 다르야 바담 구송 토르볼레 시시행아웨 셰네 하르바다 탐제 캠바 토버 셰벌 딸롱타로 와데 토버 셰벌란 지데 타다다 메트바치 랍고 생아주 지데베 삼르단다데 담베 템바치 랍고레세 콘주데 지바 삼르단 것도 나는 원에 다르바 탐제 캠바 토베 람갈도 또 말해서 거라 지데바 남네세 심제베 산니까 소레 지데바 나네 심제베 산게로 심제를 그 도나치 말해서 산게데 대졸릭 약수전이 집에 계신 부시부지 그래서 거라 네 오고 텔렌 도데스 가란조 세워라 오고스나 가란조 텔렌 도데 텐데 시게 텔레페 도니 로소 이마이게 텔렌 도베 텔레 산게레 심제 제바라 hen구요세 산게를 꼭 캡템바 보레 콩그 까데 줍고 요랑하죠 예체슈디 때려도다 아니 까투베데 심제네 야 싱들야 또제 다단다 대조 다투고 송구도 하셔서 되게 쉬었마 다 그래서 내가 텔렌 도그베스 텔레 산게레 심제 제바라 쟁구요세 지디시나세 버전네 쟁구레스나 산게레 메구브자야 메온세 텔 산게레 메구브샤마 산게레 쿠바체네 산게레 소에 오네 된다데랑 두고 어레셔라 울학바도 녜반데 그래서 그거다 제송소세 준주 레jan타 된다 책버리세 말로샤데 준주 레jan스 심장남다 자와라 산게 추tum 자와라세 산게가 송바나 시체네 산게 고바야 두고 요래 산게 송바데 소 심장다 셴벤다 차와방바다 셴데 소 투발테네 네 산게고 타바토고 송고요다 심장남다 자와라 산게 추tum 자와라 산게 고바 토바체발라 니가 팬토요라 이나네 자심장을 따다데 야부차네 야 드라드 랍셔도 이 만디베나네 소소 투르투르 만드야테 용고와라 산게 추tum 자와라 겔라 쿠이제 대신도 심장을 메치 이수스 캡템바 보들야 구샵치테 야보데세 캡템바 보데 숭바디 투야텔야네 예침부치게 말하니 마치네티 만디레스 고다 심장을 메치 이수 심장을 야텐데 산게 숭바나 시제 치통 메치야데 내주 가르 만들 버려서 거라 어디버도 시구나 다시 버리지 마세요 제가
tis bangraki.
어디래 엄마다 딱이라 로로지 큐르다데
So here, then picking up in the text, furthermore, a saying of Kadam Geshes, and we'll get to the other quote by them in a little bit, states that the two sources of merit are crucial for those who wish to attain liberation and omniscience. So here, there are two primary fields. First is the Buddha, who shows the path, who teaches us the path. And second, in accord with the path shown by the teacher, is living beings, who are both to be freed from suffering and to be imbued with happiness. So here, most of the time we see the Buddhas as being our field of merit, but then when we look at sentient beings, it's not really like a field of merit, but like a field of fighting. We don't really tend to view sentient beings in the same way that we view Buddhas, for example. We don't hold them in that kind of same level of esteem. But it is the case that when it comes to accomplishing any kind of goal we might want to achieve, like a liberation or omniscience, this is dependent upon sentient beings. So here, as it says, continuing, for living beings are the objects of compassion, which is the wish to free others from suffering, and the objects of love, which is the wish to provide them with happiness. So really, our most important, again, the Buddha is the teacher of this path, but the real thing that we should actually have respect for is the sentient beings who are the basis upon which we develop these kinds of qualities. So then it then states that for those who want liberation and omniscience, the primary source to cherish between these two is living beings. So here, when it comes to these two sort of fields, again, we normally view, it's not hard for us to sort of look at Buddhas and say, oh, I go for refuge, and we sort of have respect and veneration for that field. But sentient beings, we tend to view them as sort of a field to confront or a field to fight with. And we need to, in order to actually develop the kinds of qualities that lead to liberation and omniscience, is to learn to cherish sentient beings, actually to try to hold them as more important than oneself. This kind of wish that they have happiness and that they be freed from suffering is that which pleases the Buddhas. That's sort of what the Buddhas have become Buddhas for. And so we should, in turn, have this kind of attitude of recognizing that of these two fields of merit, of generating merit, it's actually most important for us in terms of how we treat beings on a regular basis. So here, again, as it says, it then states that for those who want liberation and omniscience, the primary source to cherish between these two is living beings. And why? In this life and all former lives, living beings have sustained us with kindness, having been our parents, relatives, and the like. Although living beings were not powerlessly made to suffer by someone else, they created their own suffering. They are nonetheless helpless, and we must help them. We must cherish them. So here, again, it's important that we hold sentient beings as being most important. This is the kind of activity, engaging in actions that bring benefit to sentient beings and help them, relieve them of their suffering, is really what pleases the Buddhas most. That's what especially brings joy to the Buddhas. And so here, when we are developing this kind of attitude of love and compassion for other sentient beings, one of these methods is to recall the kindness of sentient beings, thinking about how they have acted as, say, our mother or our father. This can be any figure in our life who has shown us great kindness. We should reflect on that. Whoever it is that we cherish most, see that that person who has sustained us in this way in this life, we have had countless rebirths in the past. There is no one then who has not acted in that capacity. So other than our not remembering it, it isn't a matter of our not having had these relationships with other sentient beings. And so if we could sort of see that the actions that we are doing now are creating what is coming in the future, we might be a lot more careful with respect to this. If you had an idea of where you were to be born based upon the kind of actions, like you could see that with clairvoyance, you would be much more careful. But we don't really have a sense of that. And so here it is really important that we come to appreciate the kindness of other sentient beings, so that we sort of treat them with this kind of respect. So here, when it comes to when we are thinking about the kind of actions that we engage in on a regular basis, if we could see the kind of, if we can see the way, not just that sentient beings have treated us with kindness in past lives, but also the sort of interconnected nature right now, all of the things that we have, from our house, our food, the roads that we have, these are all dependent upon other sentient beings. We didn't create this by ourselves. The food that we eat, the way that we're able to sustain and shelter ourselves, we are connected with other sentient beings. And so here, if we are thinking whatever kind of work we might do, if we are thinking about that sort of interconnectedness and wanting to bring benefit to others, whatever kind of work that we do can become virtuous, can become sort of in this vein, with the exception of things like, say, producing weapons or something like that. But all of our actions can become, we can see this in the world today, just like with our current situation, like the current situation of Russia invading Ukraine, and the impacts of that war have on all of the world, or things like coronavirus. We can't, we talk about like countries dealing with that individually or trying to get rid of that individually, because we recognize that our help and our harm are actually all interconnected. We have to sort of face that together. So here, rather than just thinking about the kind of ways that other beings have treated us with kindness, those that have sort of sharper faculties or more sort of strength of mind have a way of looking at others just as recognizing them as sentient beings, in that they are exactly equal to us in not wanting to suffer and wanting to have happiness. And so this sort of like a more extensive or expansive idea of mind can create a greater sort of wish for benefit. If we really sort of see that our just like us, all other sentient beings want to have happiness, and we can view them in that way, and they don't want to suffer, that really can bring about a kind of a stark change. So here again, when it says in going back to the text, although living beings were not powerlessly made to suffer by someone else, they created their own suffering. They are nonetheless helpless, and we must help them. We must cherish them. Moreover, not only do we achieve our own aim of liberation and omniscience by helping living beings, we also make the supreme offering that pleases and gladdens all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions who hold living beings to be more precious than themselves. Therefore, we must cherish living beings more than Buddhas. So those who do this reach the very heart of the Buddha's intention and thus exceptionally please him. So here again, the best sort of way to make the Buddhas happy is to bring happiness to sentient beings and to relieve them from their suffering. But we're all kind of in this situation right now, all sentient beings, as Shantideva describes, in a situation where we don't know the proper kind of causes. So out of ignorance, we sort of destroy our own happiness as we would an enemy. And out of our ignorance, we run towards our suffering as though it were something we wanted. And so we need this kind of training to understand what are the actual causes. And here, cherishing other sentient beings and working for their welfare is what helps change the way that we normally kind of act. And so here then getting to this kind of sayings of the Kadam masters, sort of advice for our everyday life. It says, again, the spiritual master Chengawa said, to attain liberation and omniscience, you must train in a practice that is at variance with what worldly people do. Again, as described by Shantideva, the way that worldly people normally act doesn't lead to very good results. And so, for instance, the worldly cherish Buddhas more than living beings. They cherish themselves more than others. They cherish those who help them more than those who cause them harm. And they cherish pleasure more than hardship. Given that, we must act in an inverse manner. We must cherish living beings more than the Buddhas. Why? Because normally not even the slightest disrespect will arise toward the Buddhas. So here, we don't normally have disrespect toward the Buddhas arise. It's quite easy to sort of say, oh, I go for refuge and kind of view that object with veneration. But when it comes towards sentient beings, disrespect or afflictions can arise quite easily. So it is most important that we try to venerate and respect sentient beings even more so than the Buddhas. And so, and then quoting from Shantideva's engaging in the Bodhisattva deeds, he says, a Buddha's qualities are attained from living beings and conquerors alike. So why do I not respect living beings in the same way as I respect the conquerors? So here again, the sort of causes for our being able to attain liberation and omniscience it's dependent on both the Buddhas and sentient beings. The Buddhas are really the teachers of the path, the things that we need to practice, but it is in relation to sentient beings that we need to actually put those into practice, showing love and compassion and so forth. And so if we have a great deal of respect for the teacher, but disrespect his teachings or disrespect the sentient beings that he has taught about, it's really contrary to the teachings of the Buddha.
Oh yeah, that's I'm going to do that. Injun do two men draws it. Agent driver join to learn do two men draw on the wa. Oh, dear. Some Sanje in dollars, dollar capsule, and this one does not. Chida nange tenje debar jongwa sungpa naa sarwa. Chi tenje ta nange tenje sinye yungwe chi tenje sidi zan zambu lengi ko nuchu ki jikten chakdang shalu tirwa. Nange tenje sidi zan nga ranzu tome maribe kunyala tenje yangla zunyi kuna kwa kursu tirwa. Chida nange tenje debar jongwa sungpa naa se. Ni kari sungdo sini taage mache se. Taage mache se kona yu tu su rangi tangi di yu ne. Ini tsu tambara tinte mare sora. Taji singe, tiru changchen baga kelingi wa. Kurang yu tu su yu yu wacha, ini tsu tani ke yungu yu si kora, tila taji si. Yu nega su ku rangi tangi di yu ne. Ini ke yungu yu si. Taagi mache, chenji mache se. Shen tani, onju chenpo la soba, rangi ne trube, yu shen, shiga ini chida nangi nuchu jiden tu chebare, te mare se. Nige mache se. Nige mache, onju ki mache, yuji machu se. Yuji chebare. Shidang se. Ishin shekwa nam chungya rong se. Ishin shekwa sanjen jiden kamla chungya rong. Jiden kamla pepna rong, ma pe rang rong se, ma pe kawi na rong se kora. Ma chungya rong. Shu nam je chunyin dine, neba o se. Sanjen jiden kamla chunna ra, ma chunna ra. Tende yangla chunyi kone kwa kodan kulu teta. Nyo jin jiden. Tene tangbo chu kingbo sha, tene namka tongbe kili tende sha, de chakda chalu so yara. O tezu kanga sanjen jiden kamla chunna ra, ma chunna ra. Sanjen jiden kamla chunni songbarwa. Ma sungna ko taga nedan tera neda yore, ma to tele shenchi yo ma re se. Sanjen pene sawara se shaba, ngoye nesuli menge tende ma re. Chunna ma chunna ko tende yangla chunyi kone kwa kodan tos kugu yore. Nyo jin jikten chaya dan jiwe de tusun jikdu yore se kuwa. Yore chu namje chunyi dene neba oso, tende yangla chunyi kone kwa kodan kulo de tuta to tende neba re se. O ti long tele tene, chitra bawe nangse, chitra bawe nangse nane, adembe teba sege chora. O tiga sena o tende yangla chunyi kone kwa kodan kulo songba de, takpa re se, tatani juwa ke yo mara sanje pemna mabina, taga re se ko takpa yin se shara. Takpa de ke marwa. She songba la tene, jime nangse sadembe tebe se, tenje debar jowa, duma cheke takpa deba zo rangre na, deba kese ma le te, zo deba shira, song la se. Tiba di che juna.
So then we turn to this next section titled Is Dependently Arisen Production Actual Production? And we get to this point of the different positions on dependent arising. So here, when it comes to dependent arising, this refers to both sort of external and internal the processes of dependent origination, like the external environment and the beings within it, and then internal dependent origination, referring to the 12 links of dependent origination, beginning this ignorance and so forth. So here, citing from a sutra, it says, in the sutra proclaiming the lion's roar, in the context of explaining external and internal dependent arisings, the Buddha says that they are neither self-generated nor other-generated. So it's not sort of like the Samkhya position, for example, that things are sort of self-generated, that the result exists at the time of the cause. It just has not become manifest. Nor is it the case that phenomena or are other, these dependent arisings are other-generated in the sense of having a cause that is sort of objectively established from its own side. Nor do they arise from both, like say both some sort of Ishvara creator god or from a principle of time or something like that. And these are true whether or not In addition, he states, whether Tathagatas appear or not, the nature of phenomena remains. So this is this kind of nature of dependent arising is the nature of phenomena, is the way that things are, whether the Buddha has come to the world and taught it or not. The 12 links of dependent origination, the kind of description of the arising of external dependent origination, whether the Buddha came and taught these or not, these are things that just are sort of the nature of things. And so citing these passages from scripture, the Mahi Shasikas, one of the early Buddhist sects, held the position that dependent arising is uncompounded and permanent. So when they see this, that like whether or not Tathagatas appear, the nature of phenomena remains, they hold that as meaning that this is permanent. And thereby, this is according to the Master Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge auto commentary, as well as Yasomitra's extensive commentary on the Treasury of Knowledge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so. Oh, yeah, do much of it. Akbar. But I get and it takes you the Barjo and the Sanje Joy and Roma Joy and the Tato Negre Son Yachivara. Oh, the Carson Gorasana. Do long do ya. Simjanam Doari to Pumbuta. Nenam Sosa. Doari to Pumbuta. Nenam so Koran Dese. Oh, that in the Yala you can call and this and Gorda. You may but I'm between Becule. You talk about it any. Joa Marese. Ne Yada Yumba Coade. Aganashi Sajan Joya Major 2000 the Negri Betamado. You talk about Inso Betamare Sigara. You talk about Ranjungi. Give you Cheva Mayembara. Ome Maripala so but Agent Deborah Yala Juni Ngamangamala Chima Chima Joya Tsugi Coadene. Ishinshikba Namjidendo Joyaro. Majoro. Ado. The Conada Nebet and the Son so de. Ado the Negris and the Sanje Penny Saba Search of Chimarese. Oran Sanje Jiden Choya Major Quacusi did and Alachu Kona Kurgi or Rese. Oh, this song better than Rese, Tibet Chituna.
So then all of the schools of Buddhist essentialists other than the Mahishashikas, however, assert that all dependently arisen phenomena are compounded phenomena produced from their respective causes. They say that the two scriptural references, though seeming to suggest that dependent arising is permanent and uncompounded, actually mean that the cyclic existence into which living beings of the six types are born and within which they live does not arise causelessly and is not the creation of a discordant cause, a permanent self-existent creator. So here again, this is something that all of these schools assert that this is sort of the natural way of things. This is not something that the Buddha made up. And here, these sorts of citations from the sutras do not indicate somehow that dependent arising is permanent and uncompounded, but rather it is suggesting again that these things have particular causes and they're not arising from discordant causes. So cyclic existence, they say, arises by way of the sequential production of 12 factors of dependent arising, beginning with ignorance. The sutra says that this process is a natural law, one that functions whether or not Tathagatas appear.
Oh, yeah. At the Darian Zuran related Kundrangdua. Avitaram Kosh, Lobe Yingichira, Vasubandukine, Zuran Renal Song Shashara. Oh, the Darian Zuran relays. Ede Kongbandine, the Shinshikbanam Joya Rum, Majoya Rose, the Shinshikban Juden Kamla. Maybe I had my pen I wrong cigar. Ship this. Yes.
Shiguma.
Oh, yes. Shibanam Joya Rum, Majoya Rum. Mood about Tado. Tado Marikbala Sogbala Tene, Duchila Sogba, Namba Kundu Jungi, Made Baras, Marikbala Tene, Duchili Tene, Sobanam Shistri Ala Shungi, Shungi Mado, Namangamala Madeni Chimashima to the Yonguma Resera, Made Baram, Shandala Tene, Namia Maino, remember Shandan Jiden Shebabuda, Ne Chisoda, Tindetin Tagbe Juletani, Reset. Shandala Tene, Namia. Mahimbe, Tenjin River Joani, Tagbaos, or Tenjin River Joani, you talk to the Negri set that remark. Each Chenanis, or it is, nothing but Tebagan Deva the Shagdos, Naji to the Soda, and the Yala you can call could use a body, Agbares, and you competent Maris, Echawaino Shena, any Yeshendo, yes, Shenane, Yeshendo, Sheso, Aleoda. You talk to Tillen Joe, maybe a negri set, and I'll talk was a net, and I said, eso. Shebane, Mobo Shen, about Chunsechi, you to Shenanis, or you talk to the negri set, Mato. Remember, Tom, with a new net, and the Alachuni, but the Wakoda, the Tagwares net in the Mares, or Mobo Shen, talk about Chunsechi, you to Shenanit, that are Mahino. She Agwarchao, she Sungshin, Sadin Bale Shenbe Randi Chidama Namjini, Eji Deber Joa, Duce Imber, Kabar Deber Sonsos, Sadin Bale Shemba the Zot, the Sigmares, Eji Deber Joa Yana Chunikone Kurzide, Idabare Mato Tabares, at the Sigmares, Ya Tibet.
So then again, here, when it's referring to, so picking up in the text, Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge auto commentary states that if you were to say that the intention of the sutra is that whether or not Tathagatas appear in the world, the factors of dependent arising, such as conditioning factors, always arise in dependence on other factors, such as ignorance, and do not arise without dependence or without depending on something else, and that dependent arising is permanent in this sense, then I too would stand by your assertion. So the Indian master Vasubandhu here is saying in his auto commentary to the Treasury of Knowledge that here regarding the Mahi Shastaka's assertion that dependent origination is permanent, he's saying that, well, if the intention in saying that it's permanent is that whether or not the Tathagatas appear in the world, that dependent arising is always functioning in the sense that like name and form has to come from consciousness, and consciousness has to come from conditioning factors, and conditioning factors has to come about due to ignorance, and so forth, then you can assert that this sort of sequence of arising of dependent origination, there's no other way for things to, for internal dependent arising to function. And so in that sense, that it's always the case, then he says, I too would stand by your assertion then that dependent arising is permanent in that kind of a sense. The text further states, if you were to say that a functional thing could have even the slightest aspect of permanence, I would have to reject your position and say that it is not so. So here, again, in terms of this assertion by the Mahishashikas that dependent origination is permanent and uncompounded, Vasubandhu can say, well, we can say that it is permanent in the sense that it is always the case, whether the Tathagatas teach it or not. Things arise in dependence upon their particular causes, but it's not permanent in the sense that nothing, no functional thing can be permanent even in the slightest. That's not possible whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. That's just on Gabaso, Purdy Kevamambus, 다시 주주지 값수세 뭐 자와시라고 주주여라 안게 땡진 레버리 좀 가과 매바 깨매바 세바 매바 땅 매바 와 매바 좀 매바 다들 메세 어디 송고여라 다시 주주지 값수세 인제 강랑 가서 강매바 가과다 깨와다 가과 매바 깨매바 세바 매바 땅 매바 와 매바 좀 매바 다들 메세 가서 계속 깨매바 송고도 just what so the Kala Yangala Soba the Kala Gaso Ameba Sombes Yawatanga Wasera Indibla to the Pewatan Dribasura Yawate Pewarisera Dribateco Akbatin Dribatisura Indila to the Yangani Suda Government Cheba Meba Tameba said. Oh, Cheba Meba Tamebas. It related in Beva. You change your mother. You thought to never take your mother. Cheba Meba. One Meba and Dromebas. You let it. You chin a chill and draw the chin a chill waters. You let it and draw on your Sarah. One Meba and Dromeba. I did the meet to Jimmy's. Chick that had and dollar to it. Rogo mene chiksigra, rogo yene ni sumsche, chikda tadeke chiora, alatete, chikda tade nis. Mehebatele gaso kesum budwa. O tisum bagi, keshi tente shiorba, o tin duce tente lukogore ese. Duce liane kewata angabata, chebata, tabata, umata, roaleso. O tinte, ramune yo mare, ya. When shy she is similar to your Maris, the Chinese Sungura. Oh, Nicolandos. She tended la de Gaba Meso Secretary, DJ to Zulia, Gaba your Marit or your Maris Ramon to the charges. She tended the land DJ in Esser. She tended la DJ in Kujanse. Chiri umabe kamdiri uwe mawa namda mendawa tende la rangi chujin la teni keben duma che tende duje tende san mayin baran duma che ki namgwa tabu ya rangyu le machun ya rangi dakshi la tene trube duma che ki tenjun ya jogba yinbe shwe tabje tenjun tu songso Kashi tsawa shirabji chochuji kapsu tenbe keshi tende tilan gakso ke me sonsake keshi tende tilan duje tende yingure shara. Tima doje chidan tende liyan duje yingu ma rese. Tima chigi chu tuzo rangi dakshi la tene dokchi ki hanyi la dojin relne ni shagu rese. Tima che la tende shagu rese. Yindiko tima che la tende lan duje tan tima che niga yo rese ti shigdo. Maybe come dinner Mawata meeting Medawars. When Mawayana and day in and Duce in Gurmado, you much a little Shagmar, Essira. When Mawata Medawa, and de la Raga Cujin, and Cape and Duce and day some Maimbaras, Duce and Chibumare. You much again Namgatabu, Jule Chu attended Mayarwa. Jule Majuya, Rangi Daxila turn a trube. You much again Tenju. Yeah, Jogba Sumben, Dumacella, attention, Deborah Yore. You don't can attention, Deborah Yomarmado. Akshita and Doxilla, attention, Drene, Yebas, and Juan said, Yebal Kotora, Yebal Kuyomara, and Dumacic and Yores. I said, Duchet and Dumacic should Tamjet and did a song, so Umabeka. Duchet Dumacic and Jogba Yembe. Should Tamjet and you in Barsong sauce, or Tipper.
So here, sorry, I left off one sentence that the auto commentary also confirms that, except for the Mahishasakas, all Buddhist essentialists assert that anything dependently arisen is necessarily compounded. So many scholars, including the master Tsongkhapa, assert that when, in the opening homage of the fundamental verses on the middle way, Nagarjuna says, whatever is dependently arisen, is and then there's these series of 8 different pairs is uh, it begins not arisen, not ceased, not annihilated, not permanent, not coming, not going, not one and not multiple. So here, this kind of description then, it says whatever is dependently arisen, and then there's this list of these kinds of sort of is not ceased, is not arisen, and so forth, mean that that any dependent arising used as the basis for repudiating functions such as arising and ceasing and so forth must be a compounded dependent arising. So here, in terms of the various understandings of something being not annihilated or not permanent, not going, not coming, not one, and not again, if we have something, it either needs to be sort of a single or multiple, and these kinds of different sort of pairs of things. This is understood that in that context, in that particular context, that must be a compounded dependent arising. But additionally, they also maintain, however, that the Madhyamaka system's presentation of dependent arising differs from that of the essentialists in that dependent arising is not confined to compounded of phenomena, which are produced from their respective causes and conditions, but also includes uncompounded phenomena such as space. So while there are certain contexts where the kind of dependent origination being described is necessarily referring to something that is compounded, according to the Madhyamaka system's presentation, dependent arising is not confined to compounded phenomena or things that are produced from their various causes and conditions, because dependently originated is also understood to refer to things being dependent upon their various bases of designation. So therefore, for Madhyamaka, these Madhyamakas then, it includes uncompounded phenomena such as space. So such Madhyamakas also assert that even though space does not arise from its respective causes, it's not a compounded phenomena, it is established independence on its basis of imputation, and as such is an uncompounded dependent arising. Therefore, in the Madhyamaka system, every phenomena is a dependent arising. So even those kind of phenomena which are not causally produced, which are not compounded, are dependent arisings in the sense of being dependently designated upon a particular basis of designation. So in this way, the kind of understanding of dependent arising is much more extensive.
Oh yeah. 땡중시베 땜바하세더라. 땜바하세데. 네뜨바하세데. 태바하세. 뜻um 다치버레세. 민기 남자레세. 민메라무 다치버레세. 땜바다 뜨바다 태바세. 찔레 떼네 시중아. 찔레 뜨네 시중아. 찔다 태네 시샤고. 이렇게 되잖아. 송베세. 땜베 자도네 시자 탐절레 열라세. 지질레 떼네 세데 시자 탐절레 우주어레 주단께 지불레 땜벌 고고 말에세. 랑게 차셰섬 딱시. 그 딱사가 민딱사가 시시어라. 텔레 땜벌에 고쳐버려서 와라. 시자 탐절레 열에서 땜바. 조에 자도야 중세데 여 지불 거야 말에서라. 주단께 떼네 중에 지불 거야 말에서. 조에 자도야 여와다 주바니래. 여와라에 고쳐버려래. 주바. 당시단 독절을 때네 예바. 주바. 텔레 중앙 고쳐버려서 주단께 때네 여와라에 중앙에서 고쳐버려. 당시단 독절을 때네 주바 예바 텔레야 중앙에서 고쳐버려서. 주바니라야 죽베에서 죽배 텔레 때니 깨와 텔레 때니 깨와 많이 발야 텔레 때니 깨바 많이나 두체 많이나야 네 다시다 차셔 텔레 때니 루바서 여바 손자 텔레 때니 샤초 그래서라 많이 발야 텔레 때니 루바다 좋아 여바 손데세 다시 레서 어디 공텔레 다시 타와 어디 시켜나 다시 롱디 안염도 남네 그래 제불래라 땡셔셔 제바보데 싱드지 샹게르지 제바보 싱 샹게 뭐 싱소와 들어와 싱소를 제 제불래라 땡셔 싱제바 내가 제들 라레라니 싱소를 무트에르 치팅게디 무트에라 라레라 제바보데 레라 땡셔 레자 레디야 제데 제바볼 뜨그레스 거 레자 제바 팅이라 얘네 좋아 마도바 두베 주네 마통어 오세 실레다 제바보니 펜지 이시 마이야 펜지 때네 중어를 숨쉬 레진 청월레자 디베난 딘조베 름부이베 통시 름부다 통원이베 직실레 때네 좋아 두바 샤쇼 그래서 오라 름불레 때네 치체레 겸 디링아도 디통아도 샤야데 름불레 때데 통아통알레 때데 름부 샤그로와 통알레 때데 름부 두바스 름불레 때데 통우 두바서 근데 샤쇼 그래 끼와게 인고 말레스 텔레 때네 티 두바텔이야 디베난 디조베 름부이베 통우시 시 름부 통우 깨시 마이야 름불레 통우 좋아라 바다스 야 어디서 엔티오마 사실 롱시도 tinяб던 도샤지 제바보다 레다 경고보 상마시바 그네 시신다 세마다 셰셰세 세말드니 셰셰도 셰셰르든 세마도벌 소바 두다 켈르드니 케바 마이나 치실로 뜨니 주바 마부요데 소라 어디 버티구나
So, they also say that the word dependent and dependent arising means both contingent and linked. So this word dependent has that kind of sense of being contingent or linked together with something. So therefore, the meaning of the word dependent is present in all phenomena, not just those that are causally produced. So we can have that sense of contingency in the sense of the whole on the parts, the sort of the thing designated on its basis of designation and so forth. So the word arising conveys two meanings, production and establishment. So thus, even when a phenomena is not produced in dependence on some other thing, it is nevertheless established or arises in dependence on that thing. So here, when it's even things that are not compounded phenomena that don't depend on their causes for their production, that we can speak of everything falling into the category of dependent arising in the sense that it is dependently established. So then, quoting from the fundamental verses on the middle way by Nagarjuna, he says, agent depends on action. Action depends on the agent as well. Apart from dependent arising, one cannot see any way they are established. So if you have, like, for example, a carpenter, someone who does woodworking, you can't establish someone's the sort of agent, a woodworker, in the absence of that activity of woodworking. Or like an artist, you can't establish, oh, they're an artist, that agent is separate from the kind of action that they do. And so too, the action can't exist without the agent to do it. So those two are contingently or mutually established. So according to the Madhyamaka system, although agent and action have not necessarily produced each other, they do arise in mutual dependence. And the Master Nagarjuna's precious garland also states, this arises because of the existence of that. For example, short exists because of long. So short and long don't have a kind of relationship of causal production, but they are dependent or contingent on each other. One can't posit one in the absence of another. So again, the commentary to this is saying Nagarjuna isn't saying that long does not produce short, but nevertheless, short nevertheless arises from long in the sense of being established from long. So through the example, so then his fundamental verses on the middle way, again, Nagarjuna, through the example of agent and action, all remaining things should be understood. So all of these things, like for example, valid cognition and object cognized, are mutually dependent, are dependently established in this sense, or dependently arisen. So even those things that are not compounded, including things that are compounded, then fall into this definition.
Oh yeah, that is awesome.
No.
Yeah.
So we will stop there for today as we're out of time.
Oh yeah.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lovesome's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kuchana Geshla.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Also.
And just a few announcements for the people online. Our last teaching again for this series is April 6th. And if you'd like to support Sarvasi Abbey to continue making such excellent teachings available online, see the chat box for information about how to make a donation. Also, please note that Geshe Tabke will be teaching on the Diamond Cutter Sutra from 7 to 9 Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday and Friday throughout April. This is sponsored by Jewel Heart Learning Center in Ann Arbor. And so link for their the teachings is in the chat box also. See you next Thursday morning.
Oh yeah.
Recording